Welcome to Renegade Thinkers Unite, possibly the best weekly podcast for chief marketing officers and everyone else looking for innovative ways to transform their brand, drive demand, and just plain cut through. Proving that B2B does not mean boring to business, here's your host and chief marketing renegade, Drew Neisser.
Hello, Renegade Thinkers. Today's guest started her new CMO position in January 2020, right before the world changed as we know it. Now, a pandemic was something you read about in the history books. I mean, think over 100 years ago, the Spanish flu, 1918. Work from home was a rare benefit for those with long commutes. Physical events were an important source of leads for just about every B2B brand. And rebranding was an investment many companies were considering, especially as there was no recession in sight and the rising tide was lifting all ships. But then COVID-19 turned the world upside down. Hashtag work from home was a trending topic. Physical events were off the table and frankly remain as a question mark for at least the first half of 2021. And rebranding felt more like a luxury than a necessity for most, but not for information builders and their CMO, Carol McNerney. She was given the mandate to rebrand when she arrived, and by golly, 8 months later, we're here to talk about it. So Carol, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Drew. I appreciate the time.
So, well, let's just first talk about how is the pandemic treating you?
Well, from a personal perspective, it's been a little bit of a refresh, just like our brand, meaning I'm able to spend a little bit more time with my family, albeit I feel like we're all working longer hours. I at least get to see my family a little bit more without the commute. Professionally, it's been, interesting, I would say. In my prior careers or prior roles, I had the luxury of being able to work from home sometimes. So that's not too much of a change for me. But I think for the team and information builders, that's a big change. So culturally, we've had to really shift and get people comfortable with working from home and learning how to use the technology and just trying to determine how to have calls and who should be on the call and things like that.
Yeah, no, it's funny because, Zoom sort of became, or Teams, whichever you use, became the sort of default for meetings. So suddenly every meeting was video. But anyway, I have to mention one thing. In our prep call, you did not mention that you went to UNC for graduate school. And you may or may not know that I went to Duke, but I'm assuming that because as a UVA grad, your basketball allegiance is more in that state than in at UNC. I'm just kind of hoping so as we proceed along.
Absolutely, Drew. I don't think you and I have this discussion if I was a true UNC fan, you being a Dookie. So, yes, UVA is my school, and I had the pleasure of being able to go to the Final Four last year. So I was able to be live and in person in Minnesota and watch the team, take the championship. So very exciting.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. That is something I have never done in Duke's 5 times around since I graduated. So you're my hero. Now, okay. So enough of ACC basketball. Hopefully that will return someday. Let's go back to January. And when you first started, what was the rationale for rebranding at that time?
Sure. Well, that actually happened before I even arrived in January. Our company is about 45 years old and founder-led up until 2017 when a gentleman, our new CEO, came in. He came in as the COO to work with the founder for about a year and a half, and then he took over as CEO in 2017. And he quickly realized this was a great brand, great technology, nice set of long-term customers, and they just needed to get into the next generation and talk about the company. And because of the 45-year history, it was well known in certain sectors or industries, but we felt that the technology needed to leapfrog into, the 21st century. And in doing so, we thought, what a great time to refresh the brand and have a more techie feel to the brand.
Interesting. Okay, so that's your mandate. You arrive in January. Some work, I guess, had already been done. How far along were you in the process when the March sort of, the lockdown sort of? I always think of March 14th as that date, but how far along were you in this refresh process?
I'd say of the art side of marketing, they were fairly far along with what the new logo would look like, which is an important element. It's the visual element, but probably not as far along with the positioning and the new messaging. And so that was where I was really excited to get involved and understand the perception that our current customers and prospects had of us, and how do we change that perception so they didn't look at us as purely a BI and analytics firm, where our real secret sauce was in the data side and our ability to access all that data. So I'd say, we were on the art side, fairly close. On the science and the messaging and positioning side, we were a little further behind. And by March, we were getting there. And we knew we have a very large customer event every June where we get our customers together, and they were doing it in person for 27 years. We knew that was going to be a great date to hit with this new messaging and positioning. So between March and June 23rd, we really ramped up our efforts to get that messaging and positioning nailed down.
So I want to go back and just break down, because, refresh and rebranding, there's so much potential in terms of all the things that can be done. So let's just start with the logo and why was it important to update that logo and your old logo, and talk about what what was the rationale? Because it's such a huge investment to go and change that everywhere. What was the rationale behind changing the logo itself?
Sure. I think there were a couple of things there. It's interesting when you talk to our customers and even to prospects, some people would call us information builders, some people call us IBI. And I think I know what we started to think was IBI was very short. It was easy to remember. We could have a lot of fun from a logo perspective. And again, thinking about being thought of as a high-tech company, we played with the idea of the data, the ones and zeros, because data, again, was the area where we really wanted to shift the focus. And so if you look at our new logo, you'll see the IBI, and it looks like the ones and zeros, the nod to data. So we thought just right away visually people would get a different impression of who we are and to change that perception. So I would say those were the two biggest reasons. Is people were calling us IBI anyhow, and then there was an ability to get that perception right away visually without even seeing the messaging.
Right. So, and this is for years, lots of companies have gone here. FedEx, came from Federal Express, and people just started calling it FedEx. And they went, oh, this is easier. So I get the IBI. That makes a lot of sense. One thing that you did differently that frankly, I don't know if I've ever seen is you kept the old name too, embedded in, or at least you have a lockup of that. That to me is a really interesting decision. Talk a little bit about that.
Sure. There were a couple of factors there. One, when you're looking at such a small, the IBI, you have to do a lot of trademark research. And so as we were looking into that, we weren't sure if we were going to be able to just go with IBI by itself. And you also have this very strong customer base and, quite frankly, a very strong employee base who had many years with the company that didn't want to walk away completely from information builders. And the one really great thing about our company is everything that we do, all the intelligence, so if you start to think about artificial intelligence and machine learning and all the data science, everything we do, we embed that intelligence into the data and analytics process. So it was a nice way to take information builders for the people who knew us as information builders and embed that into this new IBI logo. So it sort of showed our past, be proud of our heritage of what we had done in BI and analytics, and moving it and embedding it like we do with our technology into this new IBI high-tech looking logo. So at first I thought, is this just a transition logo until people get used to it? But then when we really thought about this whole embedding idea, we liked it a lot and thought this would really come across nicely to our existing customers, but also to prospects.
Interesting. It's funny because I was immediately thinking as you were talking that even if this is a transition logo, it's not, I think a lot of companies, as they think about changing their name, take the rip the Band-Aid approach. And there's a real challenge with that in that you do have equity. But, it's sort of, how do you manage it? And so you're having your cake and eat it too in many ways. And I could see in that at some point you could say, well, the embed thing is nice, but I think we just need to focus on one. But this way you don't lose anybody as you bring them along. Right? Am I missing something there? There's some advantage here to having a transition logo, even if it isn't, because it sort of bridges where you've been and where you want to go.
No, I completely agree with you, Drew. And I'll tell you the reason why I liked just the IBI by itself is many of our applications or our technology powers a lot of applications. So if you think of some of our bigger clients, they're creating portals and it has their name, our client's name on the portal. It's on their website. But we're the power, the engine behind that. And I thought, you don't have a lot of real estate on those sites. So just IBI by itself, sort of like the information builders inside idea, would be very simple and a small real estate. So that's why I liked it. So there may be, to your point, we may eventually go to just IBI when we feel we haven't lost that brand equity, as you mentioned, and then be able to take up a smaller amount of real estate on those websites.
Right. And it would make sense. And it's interesting. So in some ways, you were advancing or making it easier for you all to be an ingredient brand, a la Intel. And in the B2B world, right now, at least, being an ingredient brand feels like a good place to be. I don't know why I said that, but I just do. It's sort of... part of it is simply it gives you an increased place to be exposed, right? I mean, that was sort of how Intel built its entire brand, is through everybody else using their name.
Right, absolutely. And that's how we viewed it. And like I said, some of these very large customers, they have hundreds of thousands of people coming to their website every day. So when I think of the challenge of our brand awareness, that really gives us an opportunity to become better known.
So I want to wrap up this section because we've talked about the logo, and it's really interesting. This is something that, over 200 episodes on the show, we have not had a situation where there's been this bridge brand and where, you have a new name, but you have the old name, and those two are connected, and a new logo with the old name. I really think it's fascinating. Were there any debates internally over that approach? I mean, were they saying, are you sure you want to do it this way? Because it's unusual.
Absolutely. Everyone has an opinion, and everyone's a marketer, and everyone's, a creative genius. So I had lots of people within the firm coming to me with different ideas. And I think, some people, like you said, say, let's just rip the Band-Aid. Come on, let's go be this new high-tech company. Let's shed our past. But I had enough conversations with, the employees who've been around a long time, newer employees, and a lot of our executive team is newer. And so we did have these debates. And I think when I told the story the way I just told it to you, with this idea of giving a nod to embedded, giving a nod to data, people got it and said, oh, okay, that's actually kind of cool. And we don't lose the brand equity that we had. So absolutely, there were debates. I think we got the vast majority. I'm sure there are some people out there on our team who would not agree, but I'd say the vast majority of people really got it and said, we think this is the right thing to do.
Awesome. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to just really get into the rest of this brand refresh. So stay with us.
Hey, it's Drew, and you'll never believe what I was doing the other day. I was talking to a CMO. Yeah, I know. I talk to a lot of CMOs for the podcast, for my articles, and so forth. But this one particular CMO said to me, hey, Drew, you're doing the CMO huddles, which are really helpful. You've got your Ad Age column. You've got this podcast and your newsletter, which they read religiously. What the heck does your agency do? Just create content? And I paused and said, well, I got to work on our own marketing a little bit, so you're going to excuse this message, but Renegade is a marketing agency for B2B brands looking for innovative ways to cut through. We like to say we help wield the wisdom of 400 plus CMOs that we've interviewed for this show and for articles. Anyway, check it all out at renegade.com. I'd love to hear from you if you need some fresh thinking and want to cut through.
Okay, we're back. And we've been talking about how information builders became IBI without losing their heritage. And this is such a tricky part for brands because you want to be perceived as something new, but you don't want to give up all the things that, a 45-year history. So let's talk about now, we've got a logo, which sort of bridges that transition and speaks to digital and this embedded notion. Let's talk about the other components of the brand refresh and maybe pick one, whether it's what's the idea from the manifestation of the or the language that you use to express the rebrand.
Sure. So I think the biggest thing when I started to think about it was this idea of embedded. So one of the key messages that we wanted to get across was, obviously we're a data and analytics company, probably better known as an analytics company. So we really wanted to stress this idea of we are a data and analytics company and that we do embed intelligence into everything. So it could be a company's process, it could be their portal, it could be any technology. So we're really helping them automate how they automate their data, automate their analytics, so that they can get to better decision making. So I think those were some of the key elements that we thought about in our messaging and positioning.
Okay, and how did you, so if I go to the website now, where will I see the words embed? How did you sort of express this?
Sure. So, like we talked about, first you'd see it in the logo, kind of the information builders embedded into IBI. And then in terms of the words, absolutely. As you go into when we break out our data and our analytics platform, and we talk about the two pieces, when you get into more so probably on the data side, we talk about on the analytics side, the augmented analytics, the embedded analytics. So we get very explicit with the use of the word embed.
Got it. So one of the things that is so important with the rebranding is getting employees excited about it. What kinds of things did you do to communicate that you had this new essentially a new vision for the company?
Sure. Well, one of the things, a lot of marketers, I think, would say what's really fun is to express the new brand through swag or premiums and getting the employees excited about it and getting your customers things that you can send out. Well, that was a little trickier to do based on we were not going to have a live event. So we had to turn our summit event, that annual customer event, virtual. And so what I started to do is, yes, people were on Zoom calls and team calls, and you worried that those got overused and people couldn't get excited. I tried to bring a very high energy level that I think I have just naturally and get the teams excited. So I would meet with the different departments and explain what we were doing so that they really understood the messaging and positioning and how it related to them. And we do everything from little coffee meetups for, half an hour on a Zoom call, all the way through to our town hall meetings that we hold with the entire company. And I think probably the best thing that they could feel was redoing the entire website. I would say that the vast majority of our customers were customers and employees were probably didn't feel that our website told our story. And so with this opportunity to tell a new story, it was a great time to just redo the entire website. So I think if you look at it now, I'm very proud of it. We worked with an excellent outside firm who really helped us with imagery. So I think not only is it beautiful, but it really tells our story if you go to the homepage. And, every marketer hopes people walk away and say, wow, I get what they do. I understand their value and how they're different than the competition. And that was our objective.
And so websites can take, particularly for a big company with all sorts of services and sort of products, if you will, underneath those. How long from start to finish did a web refresh take?
This is a tough one. It was that was probably my biggest fear and biggest challenge. At first, I thought it would be, how do I turn a 1,100 in-person event into a virtual event? And I thought that was going to be my biggest challenge. I would say the website was definitely the bigger challenge. And we had a short period of time. So here I am in March, and I've determined that I need to redo the website by June 23rd, ready to launch for at the same time as our summit. So we worked very quickly and split it into pieces and said, listen, we can't do the whole thing by June 23rd. So we created 3 phases, and phase 1 was going to get us to June 23rd. And that was, I did a bulk of the work. So I didn't try to redo every case study and every customer reference and have that rebranded to be up on the website. So I took the key pieces and the key elements, used the new messaging and positioning to retell the story with the imagery, and then had just a few select customer case studies, customer references, some use cases for our key industries. And as we, once we passed that June 23rd date, now we've been behind the scenes working very diligently to get everything else built out. So it's a fuller experience for the customer or the prospect.
Got it. But it was worth sort of thinning down, focusing on just the core new story, rather than worrying about the entire, the huge number of pages and all these other things. It's just, let's get a new vision, if you will, was in your mind and was more important than having the depth of the website initially.
Absolutely. I think, there's a famous saying, and I probably won't have it absolutely right, but something along the lines of, someone wrote a letter and said, I would have written a shorter letter if I had more time.
Sure.
So I think that, and we really wanted to do was get the key messages across, and it was a challenge to do it in less words, but I think that's every challenge that every marketer has, and I think we did a really nice job of getting the key messages across, and then you want to just have the proof points and everything to back that up, and I think it was worth doing it.
So, okay. So talk a little bit about how you, so you had this virtual event in June. How did you use the new brand and communicate the new brand to, and I'm assuming this was a customer event?
Yes. Yeah, so,
okay.
So the way we did it was everything from, we had a lot of fun on social media, where it was a build-up with a little bit of a teaser where we would peel away pieces of the information builder's logo and to try to get our customers and prospects excited about what was happening. So, we knew we wanted to launch the new logo and the new messaging and positioning at the event, but not all of our customers or prospects knew that was going to happen. So we had some fun with social media doing that and making the brand come to life. And then we took advantage of, we worked with an outside firm who's been doing virtual events. They were really on the cutting edge for the last 15 years. So we found a great partner there, and we took advantage of their platform, and they let us customize that. So all the new brand colors, the new look and feel, some of the new imagery, and obviously all of the messaging. So we made that come to life through that platform. And then we also worked with all of the presenters before we launched the brand, obviously. We had new templates for presentations, and we had them pepper all of their presentations, even if it was just on product or a particular solution. We wanted to make sure that they included and really felt the spirit of the new messaging, not just the new look and feel.
Got it. So it is the entire experience. And how did it work out? I mean, how was attendance and how, first of all, how long a virtual event was it? How many hours or days?
Sure. So in the past, it used to be a 4-day event live, four full days. And then it had skinnied down to about 3 full days. And we just thought to ourselves, wow, I don't think you're going to get people's attention for that long. So we created our keynote, which we felt was going to be the most critical part of the event, because we could get prospects and customers to that and just, give some of the information about our roadmap, but then the rest would be very detailed in our breakout sessions for our customers. So we were thrilled. We had over 3,500 people sign up to attend the event. And at the keynote event, we had, I think the numbers were about 2,600 attended that keynote session. So a mixture of customers and prospects. So we were very happy.
Sure.
As you can imagine, Drew, we were doing, yeah, go ahead.
Those are good numbers. I mean, often, if you get, 5,000 registrants, you get 33% to show up, you're doing well. So those are good numbers. And I'm curious, first of all, what platform did you use for the virtual event?
Sure, it's a company called Intrado. It used to be West Communications.
Yeah. No, I know a couple of CMOs who've done their events on Intrado and had good experiences. So they're not paying me to say that, just so everyone knows. So let's, okay. So virtual events, I've talked a lot and done a number of shows on, and there's still, how long was it? How long was the whole summit, if you will, or because I didn't get that answer, or if you.
Sure. So it was over a two-day event. And what we did was some of the sessions, we made sure that we had people live to answer questions. So some of the sessions were set up where we had our team, our IBI team members, or our customers, and even some of our partners ready to answer questions. But we knew you might not get people for 2 days straight. So we made all of those sessions on demand. So the only thing that the prospect or customer would miss is the live Q&A if they didn't attend at that particular time. And now that's available for a year, which is fantastic. So people can go back and review sessions and learn more about our products and solutions.
Yeah, I think one of the things that for the listeners just to be thinking about is it is wonderful to have a virtual event. You can get still very good numbers, and attendance can be good. I love the fact that you sort of divided it up over a 2-day period and didn't. One of the things that these things can do, if you invest enough money in the upfront, is create a lot of content that you can slice and dice down the road. So just keep that in mind. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and then I really want to get into sort of some of the lessons that you've learned as a result of all of this over the last 7 months. So stay with us.
Hey, it's Drew, and I was talking to a CMO the other day who had a great metaphor for helping brands get through this difficult period. And it was, think of yourself as a race car driver. You're going into a turn and you have to slow down, but you're looking for the perfect way to sort of slingshot out, to accelerate out of the curve. With that in mind, we published on Renegade.com a new special report called 6 Ways to Drive B2B Demand Generation in a Downturn. I think if you like the show, I think you're going to really enjoy this special report. It's full of really good examples that brands have been doing in the last 6 months to get themselves in a position so that they can accelerate out of the downturn. There's 6 ideas: streamline your brand story, retool your growth engine, retrain your pit crews. I can't cover them all now. I want you to check out the report. Again, it's on renegade.com.
Okay, we're back. And we've been talking a lot about the rebrand and the process, which was a very condensed process. And as you think back about it now, maybe you could sort of, what do you wish you knew that you know now as you were going through this process?
Yeah, I think I would say I wish, obviously my dream would have been to have a lot more time. I was able to speak with analysts and speak with customers and some prospects, but I wish I had just had a little bit more time to really feel stronger about the messaging. I think we did a good job, and we're seeing good results from it now. But that would have been a nice thing to have, as a little luxury of a little bit more time.
And that's such a tricky trade-off in our business and all the time. I mean, and I think a lot of CMOs listening will appreciate that. There's been so many folks that have rushed to change their message in the last since COVID, and some for good reason, because their messaging was just tone deaf. I think this was a very different situation for you, in that you were taking a brand that had a nice heritage, but trying to say, hey, we're more than what you think we are. You know us as analytics, but we've got this data component. And I think it just takes time to sort of get all of that right. All right, well, you mentioned that the results have been good. Talk a little bit about the results and how you measure the success of, or anticipate measuring the success of this brand refresh.
Sure. Some of it, because we did time it with our virtual summit, and I mentioned this, kind of exciting social media campaign that we did to pique people's interest. I think that helped drive a lot of attendance to our summit, which helped increase our brand awareness, because it wasn't just our customers this time, it was prospects. So we look at numbers, obviously, of people, how we increased our brand awareness, what's happened with our website, with a brand new website. We've seen a real increase in engagement on our website. So we had hoped for that, anticipated that, because we had a new message, because we've used more video elements. That's one of the really exciting things that we've learned everyone always knew video is a great medium, but we've seen a higher engagement level on our website. We saw a higher engagement level during our summit, that people really did spend more time at the summit, even than we had hoped. And I think, obviously the bottom line is, are you getting more marketing qualified leads, sales accepted leads, and getting more revenue? And we're starting to see a pickup in some of our cloud offerings that we really were pushing in Summit, and a lot more interest. And, Drew, we talked about live events, are not here right now. We've seen an incredible pickup in the amount of virtual webinars that we're doing. Numbers where we used to see at live events, like you said, you get a certain percentage of, or you get the people who sign up, and then a certain percentage who show up. We're seeing 70 to 80% of the people who sign up for a virtual webinar showing up. So we've seen really great numbers there.
So I'm just going to summarize that. So by the way, how are you measuring awareness?
So we're looking at, in the absence of doing a brand awareness survey, where we have a benchmark and then, check again, what we're doing, we're using our website as a proxy for right now. And, to be honest, we need to start looking at some other measures. Okay.
Got it. Yeah, and it makes sense, and it's one that's thrown out there, and it's one that it's a metric that you and I know is important, and there's lots of research that shows it, but it doesn't always carry water in the C-suite. I just have to share a funny story to give context to this. A lot of times CEOs don't necessarily appreciate what awareness means or doesn't mean to their salespeople or from an recruiting standpoint. But there's a famous story when the chairman of Nissan checked into a hotel in the United States and said, "Hi, I'm from this company called Nissan." And they said, "Who?" And the next day he called the agency and said, "Hey, we're not going to be Datsun in the US anymore. We're going to be Nissan." And they spent $100 million so that next time he checks into a hotel, they know who he is. But it's a long-winded way of saying awareness is a lot more important than people want to give it credit, but it is challenging to measure, and it is also challenging to persuade. So when you follow that up and said, yes, but we're getting SQLs and MQLs, obviously that's the language the C-suite understands. And so this is an interesting part of where marketers sort of struggle to translate the language that they know is important into sort of language of the business. Any of that resonate with you?
Yeah, Drew, absolutely. I think this is so critical. Growing up as a marketer, over almost 30 years in the field, that is such a debate that goes on in the C-suite. And, I could sit here and say, okay, we've moved the needle on awareness. We have this many more people hitting the website. I look at social media and see if we have more followers and the engagement level in social media. I look at our impressions through our PR, if we're getting more stories written about us, and, you look at circulation and hope. But those are hard things for the C-suite, especially the CFO and CEO, to relate to. And they say, well, that's great. And so even some of the anecdotal stories, which I'm excited that our account executives, our sales team says, hey, when I pick up the phone or our sales development reps call someone, they say, oh, yeah, I've heard about you guys. So that's encouraging. But again, those are anecdotal. And getting that translation to, well, I was able to get more marketing qualified leads because people at least who knew who we were and picked up the phone. So I always say, it's marketing's job to grease the skids so that when sales goes in, they can go in and at least say, great, I know who you are. I'm willing to have a conversation with you.
Yeah. So so many things that we covered in the show. I'm going to attempt to summarize them for the listeners. Just one, when you do decide that it is time to refresh, there's usually a really important business reason to do so. And in this case, there was an important business reason, is that you needed to expand perceptions of the brand because you were sort of pigeonholed in what was, in some ways, what was an old school thinking of business and intelligence. And you need to sort of connect the dots for the customer, saying, no, this isn't just about analytics, it's about data too. So there's a good business reason for doing it. Number two, you don't necessarily have to rip the Band-Aid. You can have a transition plan as you go through this. And the transition plan in this case could be the plan. It could just stay there. Number three, when you do launch, it really helps to have a big event to launch around, both to set the deadline so that because otherwise this thing can go on. But then to introduce it to employees and customers, because right then and there, you sort of get a sense of, hey, that, one, you're taking a chance, but you really do get a chance to expose the new thinking to your customers. And if they get excited about it, you're in good place. And then sort of to condense this all down, obviously you'd always want more time. That's key. Obviously, you'd always want to talk to your customer more and more and more, but at some point you run out. So you sort of, you as a marketer, you have to do the best you can. Lastly, finding the metrics that matter to the organization. While again, we spent a little time talking about awareness and the need to measure that, eventually every marketer is going to be called to task to their remit to the business. And so, when you do this, obviously you still need a plan for how are you going to help drive sales. And there's just no way around that, I don't think. Carol, what did I miss? Was there another lesson learned from your experience that you would share with other CMOs?
I think the big thing for me is this idea of the concept of virtual events. I think there's a lot more power to them than you can imagine. And it doesn't have to be these big, huge, like our big summit events. I think these virtual webinars, there's a lot there. Not only do you have an opportunity to get to a broader audience, so we used to do regional customer meetings. Now we can do global meetings for that particular industry. So I think there's a real opportunity to do that. And I think people are willing to spend a lot more time on your website, on videos, if you have the right content for them. If you do one of these big events, I would highly recommend one of these event apps. It was such a great, we used Socio app. It was such a great way for our customers to connect with each other, for our partners, I mean, we had over 11,000 people making connections on that app, and thousands of downloads of our materials, of our customer materials, our partner materials and our customer materials. And I think it was just a great way for our partners, for them to engage and to feel like, okay, if I'm going to sponsor this event, what do I get out of it? So I think you definitely should take advantage of some of the technology that's out there that can really make your events much better, whether it's a large summit or some of your smaller virtual events.
That's great. And I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I know that, and it's funny that, in the old days, the marketer would get bored with their campaign a lot sooner than the consumer would. And that was sort of a legendary thing. But I think the same thing started to happen with virtual events. There was an assumption that there was virtual event burnout, but I'm talking to lots of marketers who are still having success with them. Some of the numbers might be declining, but not much. And part of it is, hey, people aren't commuting, and maybe they're willing to learn and get educated. And definitely want to check out the Socio app and find out what that does. All right. So, Carol, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Drew. This was a lot of fun. I appreciate you taking the time.
So for all our listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, you can thank me by writing a 5-star review on your favorite podcast channel, or by sharing the show with a fellow marketer. Renegade Thinkers Unite is written and directed by Drew Neisser. Hey, that's me. Audio production is by Sam Beck. The show notes are written by Melissa Caffrey. The music is by the amazing Burns Twins, and intro voiceover is Adam Cornelius. To find the transcripts of all episodes, suggest future guests, and learn more about quite possibly the best B2B marketing agency in NYC, visit renegade.com. And until next time, keep those renegade thinking caps on and strong.